Well, hello there and welcome. I am S.R. Moore and this is Mistwood Publishing, the best place to rediscover your wonder and to allow yourself to still be inspired. All right, so I wanted to continue talking about Servants of Judgment. Again, like as I've said in my last two videos, Saga 1 was really one arc. And so in this book, that's no longer true. There are these three separate arcs that are going through the whole book, and they really provide a nice reprieve. If you're ever getting tired of one arc, then this kind of like, it keeps things chugging along smoothly. And you could also just read the book if you've read it once through and you're like, man, I want to read it again, but I really only want to focus on the King storyline, then you can do that. It's so well split up by the sigils at the beginning of each chapter. So like this is the Narbad sigil. The arc I'm talking about today is going to be the King's arc. So that sigil is just the circle but with a crown in the middle. So anytime you see a chapter with the crown logo, you know it's going to be Indru and Henry, the two princes of Hanor, which is where Saga 3 will take place. So before I published Saga 1, I put a epilogue at the end of the book that was originally not going to be there, and when I did that, I already had Saga 2, excuse me, Saga 2 completely written, and I was just feeling like, man, it's not enough. It just kind of feels really redundant. I need something to break up the Narbad chapters so that it feels like this is taking a while to do, so it doesn't feel rushed. There wasn't enough chapters with Zack and Hale to properly do that. So I wanted to do almost like where there was a Narbad chapter, a different chapter, a Narbad chapter, something else. And this, combined with the Zack storyline, allowed me to do that. And so I added this epilogue to the end of Saga 1 and ended up being most people's, like some people said, my best writing in Saga 1 was the epilogue. Well, Indru and Henry, who are in that epilogue, that is this arc, but they're a little bit older. I've aged them up a little bit so that we're not having children, do horribly unethical things. So if you like that epilogue, honestly, for understanding this arc, you technically don't need to read the epilogue, but it's a good refresher to kind of remind yourself why these brothers don't like each other. So it doesn't hurt to go through and maybe read that again, or if not, you don't have to. Basically, the gist is Indru killed their father for reasons that are complicated at best. And Henry saw this before Indru leapt out the window and ran away. And so we're kind of catching up, starting this arc with, well, what have they been up to for the last few years? How did that all play out? And, it hasn't played out yet. So this arc really is for those that like political intrigue. There's no, political commentary on, modern day stuff, but there is a cool little, I don't want to say Game of Thrones because it's not, but political intrigue storyline that would, although it's not like Game of Thrones, it would more than satisfy people that like that aspect of Game of Thrones. So if you like political intrigue, people betraying each other, drama, this is the arc for you. We got Henry, who's trying to be king even though he doesn't want to be king. He never wanted to be king, and he's kind of forced to get married. Henry is one of those guys that's always been more interested in sword fighting than he was in, catching damsels in distress or anything. whereas Indru was always the brother that was the ladies' man, excuse me. So it's kind of interesting to see Henry navigate that while also trying to deal with his traitorous brother who escaped, and he still hasn't captured him, still hasn't found him. Meanwhile, Indru's trying to build some sort of support to reclaim his throne, and there's all sorts of political players that have their own motivations, and, because nobody wants anything, and, they're not going to do anything unless they get something out of it themselves. So it's very complicated. A lot of it is inspired by, I take a lot of inspiration from real-life historical events with Cesare Borgia and the things that Machiavelli wrote about him in The Prince. So I take a couple stories from that and apply it to this fantasy setting. Much like, Game of Thrones is basically just a copy of The War of Roses. This I'm taking from some Italian Cesare Borgia history and applying it to this fantasy setting. And, the reality is most people don't really know anything about those historical figures, so it'll be very surprising. But those that do know, might appreciate the little historical nod. I am a history teacher after all. So I will admit that political intrigue, before writing this, I didn't think I was even capable of it, but you can't just take a historical event and rely solely on that. So there is, obviously I had to hone those skills, and I think I do a pretty good job. The AI editor critiquer that I ran it through was very complimentary of this arc and these chapters. It really rounds out the story to include a flavor and an element that maybe was missing before from my stories. So it's really well done, and very importantly, it leads, this arc is the setup for Saga 3. So, this is a trilogy, and it's all leading up to this big moment, and it might not seem that way at the end of Saga 1, for example, or if you're just reading the Narbad arc, but it is all building to something. Narbad just doesn't know it, right? But it is, and that is obviously going to be the end of the trilogy, the Narbad trilogy, which will be Saga 3. So this arc is really setting up these events of Saga 3, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it with Saga 3. It's not a question of who will die, it's a question of who is going to survive, because a lot of characters will be dying in Saga 3. It's going to be, I don't want to say it's like Revenge of the Sith or anything, or whatever episode 3's name is, but it's going to have a similar emotional feeling to it. There's no Darth Vader figure or anything, but it's going to have kind of that somber loss feeling to it. And in order to understand that arc, that book, this is the arc that sets a lot of that up. With Saga 3, I don't think I'll be able to say, oh, you don't have to have read the previous books to get it. I will try my best, but at the end of the day, this arc in Saga 2 is imperative for understanding Saga 3. I hope you guys enjoy the political intrigue of Indru and Henry and all of the chaos that comes with it. It is so good.